Today's project is to build a spinning top on the lathe. This is an excellent beginner's project as it requires almost no precision, and I'm going to build it on my hobby lathe. I've got this piece of 10mm aluminium plate, and because I'm a complete masochist, I'm going to try making a disc out of it. I want to be able to mount it on the lathe, so using a bit of scrap aluminium, I'm going to weld that to the centre and then hopefully be able to lathe it into a circle. To make sure I get it nice and straight and perpendicular, I'm just going to drill a hole in the centre for that rod to go in. Then it's just a matter of welding that to the plate. Of course, there are a lot easier ways to make a disc than this, which you'll see later on down the track in the video. But for now, this is what I'm doing. If I just mounted this in the lathe, it'd be a very nasty interrupted cut, so I'm just going to cut the corners off the square to give it a bit of a head start. The resulting disc is going to have a big hole in the middle of it anyway, and I'll be cutting off the rod once I've got a disc made on the lathe, hopefully. An interrupted cut is a nasty thing, so I take it very slowly and take just a little bit off at a time. I'm finally getting there. I've almost got a circle. Ooh, I'm excited. This looks like it might work. I've cut the rod off the back of the disc and now I want to hold it in the chuck, but I need my other jaws. So a little bit of fiddle farting around. These jaws go in so I can hold that big circle. With the disc held in the lathe like this, I can clean up this face. I'm going to use a bit of this aluminium for the shaft. So I'm going to drill a hole through the disc that's just a bit smaller than that aluminium rod. Just like me, this tool isn't the sharpest one in the shed. Right, the disc is finished. I can take that out of the lathe and put it aside. But I admit there was a lot of faffing around to get that made. But at least I proved to myself that I can do it. I'm just guessing by eye how much of that aluminium rod I'm going to need for the shaft of the spinning top. Now I'm turning down that shaft almost all the way so that it fits inside the disc. As you can see, I went too far. That's too floppy. So I had to turn down a bit more of the rod to the right dimension, and that's perfect. I'm now turning down the shaft that will fit inside the handle that you hold when you get the spinning top going. It'll make more sense a bit later. On the section of the shaft that I haven't turned down, I want to lay the point. So I'm going to part this off, turn it round in the lathe, and then put the point on that end. I've just guessed an angle on the top slide. So I've turned this top slide on quite a steep angle, and now just using the top slide to cut that point into the base. Okay, that was pretty easy. Gave it a bit of a clean up, and that's the shaft almost completed. You can now see how it fits into the disc. Just a tight press fit. Now I'm going to use this larger aluminium to make the handle. It just has to be a bit longer than the shaft. And I'm going to knurl the top section of it just to make it a little bit more grippy when you're hanging onto it. This is my knurling tool. It pushes a pattern into the rod. After I bought this tool, I realised that I really should have bought the knurling tool that clamps top and bottom. It's a lot easier on the lathe. But this is what I've got at present, and it works okay with this fairly thick rod anyway. So I just slowly push it into the rod, and when I've got a bit of a pattern, I can start moving it along just slowly, cutting the pattern into the aluminium. Okay, that's done. Looks a bit rough at the moment, but by the time I clean it up, it'll look $100. I need to drill a hole almost to the end that the shaft for the spinning top will go into. The hole needs to be a really loose fit to the shaft. This makes it easier to lift the handle off once the top has started to spin. The shaft is about 7.5mm, and I'm using an 8mm drill. This will create a nice sloppy fit. You'll notice I have a slightly thicker section at the base of the shaft. I'm going to just drill into the handle just a small way. Again, clearance. This isn't really necessary, but I guess it just helps the shaft to spin a little bit easier and center itself while you're getting the top spinning. Righto, let's give it a test fit. Excellent, a nice loose fit. Now I can part the handle off and it'll be finished. Well, almost. I still have to drill a big hole in that handle. I put the handle back in the lathe and just finished off the top, but didn't bother filming that. So now it's time to put a big hole in the side of this handle. This is a useful little aid to get the drill centered. Once the ruler's balanced, the drill's in the right spot. I just started with a small drill to get it in exactly the right place. Then I moved up a couple of sizes till I had the final size that I wanted. This hole needs to be big enough so that the string that you wind around the shaft has somewhere to wind without getting caught up in the handle. You'll be able to see how this works in a minute. The big drill leaves a bit of a crummy edge on both sides of that hole, so just cleaning it up with the Dremel. There we go, handle's completed. Okay, one more thing to do before assembling all the bits. With the shaft in the handle, I need to just mark a spot midway where I'm going to put a tiny hole that the string will go through. Oh yes, I forgot. I'm going to make an aluminium knob that goes on the end of the string. So this requires a bit of ball turning action. I've cut a thread in the end of a bit of off-cut aluminium and then just wound it onto my holder so that I can cut the ball. Okay, so now it's time for a bit of emery paper, a couple of different grits, and then some steel wool to get a nice shiny ball. Look at that. Is that a thing of beauty or what? Now, I'm left with a big hole in the end of that ball, but I want to put a bit of string in it, so I've just wound a bit of dowel into that hole, cut it off on the bandsaw, and then I'll just drill a small hole to put the string in and glue it in. It's time for final assembly. I'm using super glue. I'm just going to put a tiny dab on the end of the string. This makes the end of the string stiff so that I can thread it into this hole in the end of the knob. But I'm having trouble seeing it, and unlike some, I need to take my glasses off to see close up. Right, that's better. Got it. So now I've poked it into the hole. I can put a dab of super glue on it and that will hold it. While that bit of super glue is drying, I'm just going to use a bit of blue Loctite. I probably could have used super glue as well on this, but I don't know. Blue Loctite seems to be the thing that I wanted to use to put the shaft into the disc. It's a nice firm fit, and it just takes a bit of a push to get it to seat itself in. This is the only bit of precision required in this whole project. Now, we don't need very much string. Just about that much will do, I think. I'm just using builder's line. And again, I'm just putting a tiny dab of super glue right on the end of that string. It stops it fraying and also helps to thread it into the hole. So this is how all the bits go together. The handle goes on, thread the line into the hole, turn it sideways, turn the disc, which winds the string onto the shaft, and we're ready to race. So now I simply hold the handle, pull the string, lift the handle off, hopefully a bit straighter than that, and I'll start the timer and see how long this thing goes for. Because I didn't pull the handle off nice and straight, the top is wobbling around. Now this is at fast speed, of course, as you can see from the timer. But with a bit of practice, you can get the spinning top to spin nice and straight. But as you can see, even with this wobbly start, it's still going for 4 minutes. Back to normal speed. And it started to have a wobbly, so I thought, okay, it's going to stop, I'll turn the timer off. But then it righted itself and kept going, so okay, I'll start the timer again and see how much longer it'll go. So a bit more fast motion. When it finally stops, we find that it's run for about 5.5 minutes. As I said earlier, you don't need to go to all that faff to make that big aluminium disc. I've made another one using a bearing, and this one really runs beautifully. Let's have a go at this. Beautiful and smooth. Just make sure you crush the cage on the ball bearings, otherwise it won't run at all. Anyway, this has been a fun project and the grandkids love playing with these.